Great. So let's do a quick revision of what we did yesterday. So we basically looked at core services in Azure Cloud yesterday. The security services also that basically feeds data to Microsoft Sentinel service so that it can receive that data in the workspace to which Sentinel is attached. It can process the data, it can analyze the log data, it can identify anomalies, security misconfigurations, any probable security incident. So that's what we went through. So we started with Azure Active Directory, and we basically started with minimum viable cloud, that if I have a production environment, or if I need to build a production environment in Microsoft Azure Cloud, what will be the minimum services that I would need to build before I start to build my first application, before I start to migrate my first server or application into the cloud. So we looked at Azure Active Directory, which is the authentication and authorization service. And other than providing authentication and authorization, it does provide a couple of additional security capabilities, which are multi-factor authentication, conditional access, identity protection, identity lifecycle management, custom domain, enterprise application registration, single sign-on. So there are multiple capabilities that it brings on the table. Then we looked at networking services in Azure, which is virtual network. Why do we create? Why do we need a network in Azure? What do we do with that network? What are the building blocks and components of a network? We looked at a very high level. We also looked at native security services, which are part of Microsoft Azure Cloud Platform, which is Network Security Group, Azure Firewall. So we discussed about what these services are and how do they differ from one another when it comes to the specific use case. We looked at compute service, both server and serverless. We looked at storage. Databases we did not specifically look at, but Microsoft Azure does provide databases that you can install on the top of a virtual machine in the IaaS form, infrastructure as a service, and you can also provision databases in the PaaS format, which is platform as a service, in which the database hosting server will be managed by Microsoft, and the database you will be managing as a customer, and you will get access to the database through a utility. For example, if it is SQL database, you will have SQL Server Management Studio, a small piece of software that you basically deploy in your system, using which you can connect to your Azure SQL databases and you can manage them. So that's what we do with the databases. So we talked about Azure Active Directory in detail, networking, and then information and data protection. And we looked at the data protection, I'm saying data lifecycle, the various processes which are involved in between. I'm saying from the time you create data or you store data in the data repository, and then you use that data, and once the data is not needed, you discard that data, you delete it, which is known as crypto shredding, which is the best practice around data destruction. We also call it data destruction. And then we talked about cybersecurity and cloud security, security monitoring. We looked at compute. We looked at governance and compliance services, which is Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So we all enabled Microsoft Defender for Cloud yesterday. Since it is an Azure sponsorship subscription, which is a prepaid subscription with $100 worth of credit valid for 30 days, you also get trials for various Microsoft services as part of this sponsorship subscription. So we enabled a trial, 30 days trial of Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and we did enable all the capabilities of it, all the services of Defender. We looked at Azure policy. We talked about Azure Blueprint and Purview, Azure Active Directory, Azure Management Group. So coming back to Azure Active Directory, what we need to do, so we are building the environment. We're building an environment for Sentinel. We will build an environment for Sentinel today. So let's log into your respective Azure subscription. All of you, please log into your respective Azure subscription. So this is what we are going to do today. I will make a note of at a very high level the steps that we configure or the activities that we do, so that you will have a record of how did we start, so that when we reach in, when we start focusing on Sentinel, you would know that what environment did we build and what steps did we follow. So this will basically help you with that. So what we need to do now, Sentinel has the capability to receive logs from Azure Active Directory and process those logs and identify vulnerabilities, because Azure Active Directory is a security service. So Azure Active Directory will keep a record of all the logs with respect to the user sign-ins, with respect to the user activity. Now, in Azure Active Directory, on the Active Directory blade, you will see here in the monitoring, it says sign-in logs, audit logs, provisioning logs. Now, all of these logs, sign-in logs, all the sign-in that happens in Azure Active Directory. For example, right now you have your own subscription and you are the only person logging into the subscription. So there will only be one sign-in logs, but in a production environment, you will have multiple users signing into Azure portal to do their job or to deliver their job role and responsibilities almost every day, multiple times in a day. So there will be multiple logs. And for each log, there could be a probability that some user tried to sign in from a location other than what user would always use. Some user tried to sign in, but typed password incorrect again and again. And then in the end, it typed this correct password and it was able to log in. So all these sign-in logs, audit logs, and provisioning logs, anything that you provision in Azure Active Directory, all of these logs can be sent to Microsoft Sentinel. However, you can only send these logs to Microsoft Sentinel when you are using a paid version of Azure Active Directory, not the free version. So what we are going to do, we are going to subscribe to the trial of paid version so that we can configure these logs. We can stream these logs to Microsoft Sentinel. So how do we purchase trial? In the Azure Active Directory overview blade, there is an option that says license. Under manage, there is an option that says license. Please click on that. When you click on it, you will see this window that says, to your right, it says get a free trial. Under quick task, it says get a free trial. Do you all see that?
Yes.
Click on that, get a free trial, and please take a free trial for Azure AD Premium P2. Azure AD Premium P2. So you will just need to click on free trial. The arrow, it will expand and hit activate. You will get 100 licenses valid for 30 days. Post 30 days, the account will get disabled. You will need to manually convert it to pay as you go if you wish to continue. Otherwise, discard it. It will get deleted all by itself by Microsoft in some time. So activate the license. So we are activating Azure AD Premium P2 license here. All right. So the license is activated. Now, after the license is activated, you will also need to have a couple of users in Azure AD so that you will use those user accounts to do some sign-in, so that some sign-in logs are getting generated. Since this is a plain, plain environment in Azure, we don't have anything built and we are building the environment by ourselves. So we will need to build the bare minimum environment for our Sentinel service to start working and start showing its capability. So that's what we will spend, majority of the time today to build the environment. So now what we need to do, now that we have enabled the license, we have subscribed to the Premium P2 license. Premium P2 is the highest license in Azure AD, which provides you all its security capabilities. And all the capabilities that it offers to the customer are part of Premium P2. If you are a Microsoft 365 customer, and if you have E5 license, Enterprise Mobility E5 license, then you also have Premium P2 by default, because E5 includes all the capabilities of Premium P2. However, it is not vice versa. If you have Premium P2, it doesn't mean that you will get all the capabilities of E5 Enterprise Mobility license. It's not vice versa, because you will first need to subscribe to Microsoft 365 service, and then you will need to purchase a specific license for the mailboxes, for the user mailboxes that you will create. And basis on the license type, you will get the capabilities from M365. Okay. Now, what happens in most of the scenarios, a customer would first subscribe to M365 services, or is already subscribed to M365 services, and later on they subscribe to Microsoft Azure Cloud. In that case, their existing M365 license, E3 or E5, can be leveraged for Azure Active Directory service that they will also receive as part of Microsoft Azure Cloud subscription. So this is about licenses. Now let's go back to the home page of Active Directory, and let's create a couple of users. At least 3 to 4 users we will need to create here, and we will need to grant them separate permissions, separate RBAC. One user we can make a owner, the other user will be a contributor, the other user will be a reader, and the other user will be, let's say, having some other RBAC. So we need at least 5, 6 users here, and we will need to sign in with those users so that there is a sign-in logs getting created. While you sign in with those users, you will need to make sure that you provide incorrect password for some of the users 3 or 4 times in a row, so that the sign-in logs also contains the logs with respect to failure login attempt. So that's what we are going to do now. So let's create a new user. So when you are creating a new user, you will just need to type the user principal name and say name of the user. So I'll create some users, Ram.Kumar. You also create along with me. If you have not done that in the past, this is very simple. If this would have been a production environment, probably the users may have synchronized, user accounts may have synchronized from on-premises, and you would directly see them in Azure Active Directory. But since this is a new environment and we don't have access to an on-premises Active Directory, we can't use a production environment for this training. I don't have access. I do have access to a couple of production environments from my clients, but I cannot show them on a recorded session. And at the same time, you may have access to your production environment, but we cannot use that environment to do this training, to do the configuration. It is not supported, it is not recommended, and you may not have appropriate access to do that also. So we will build our own environment for Sentinel. So it's Ram.Kumar. The user principal name will remain the same, the domain that Microsoft is providing to a customer by default. If you have your own domain, then you can add a custom domain, and then your user principal name will show your username, first dot last name at your domain suffix. But here we'll use with the same method. So this is my user principal name, and I will check this box derived from user principal name, which basically means that if I ever subscribe M365 service, the mailbox or the email ID for this user will be ram.kumar at this domain, which is the default domain from Microsoft. Then the display name, Ram Kumar. Password, we can auto generate or we can type the password ourselves. However, in both cases, when the user will log in for the first time, user will need to reset the password. So let's do auto generate password. Account is enabled. Yes, we will need to enable this account as soon as it is created. Next is properties. Here we can fill in some information. User will always be a member because we are creating a user account in the directory. However, you have another type of user, which is a guest. So you can also invite external users who are not part of your domain, who are not your employees. They could be your vendors, partners, or anybody else. You can invite them to browse the applications that you have configured in Azure Active Directory, as well as services that you have configured in an Azure subscription through this method. So you can also invite guests. All you just need to provide their email address, and they will receive an invitation. They will need to accept the invitation. After that, they will be able to access the Azure Active Directory based applications, but you will need to provision their user in the applications, or you will need to grant them access to Azure subscription also. So first, let's create a member account. Now, all of this information is not mandatory, so you can leave it. Job title, company name, all of that you don't need to put it. Manager, you can also leave it. Sponsor, you can also leave it. All that street information, you can leave it. That is not mandatory. However, in a production environment, all of these fields needs to be filled. Okay, the most important thing here is usage location. You will need to provide usage location for the user. So Azure Active Directory knows that the user's usage location is a specific country. And whenever that user tries to log in from a location other than the usage location, Azure Active Directory will consider that as an anomaly, and it may throw additional challenges, additional authentication challenges to the user to validate that it is the authentic user who is trying to log in. So since I'm in India, I'll put user location as India. My friends in Australia will put user location, usage location as Australia. Okay. Assignments. In the assignments here, you can add user to a group, and you can also assign a role to the user on the subscription. So we will add user to a group. Now we don't have a group here. So we cannot add this user to a group. So we'll add that user later to a group, but let's add a role to the user. So adding role basically means that now you are assigning some permissions to the user in Azure Active Directory. So I will assign global reader permission to the user. Just type global and you will see global admin, global reader, global secure. So I'll assign global reader permission to the user so that user can read everything which is there in Azure Active Directory. So I've assigned the role to the user also. Then in the end, you just need to hit review plus create, just validate the information that you have provided and create this user. So when this user account is created, so it says successfully created user. You will need to refresh the screen and you will see the user account. So you can see the user account here. However, we forgot to copy the password. So we will need the password of this user so that this user can log in. So what we will do, we would rather reset the password for the user. We'll reset the password like this. And now it gives me the temp password. So I'll copy the temp password, open a notepad file on your system, and on that notepad file, make a record of all the users that you are creating. Like this, username, then the user principal name. This user principal name is the email or is the login ID for the user. So you will need to copy this user principal name also. So I've copied the user principal name, and you will need to copy the password for the user, temp password for the user. Okay. So I've copied all the three information: username, user principal name, and user temporary password. You can do the same thing in Microsoft Word by creating a table and then put all these values in the table in separate rows and columns of the table. So that's my first user. Now, similarly, before I create my next user, let me create a group here. So how do I create a group? Under manage, there is an option that says groups. I'll click on groups, click on new group, and I will need to select whether it's a security group or M365 group. Azure Active Directory is common for both Azure Portal or Azure Cloud as well as M365. In fact, it is common for Microsoft Dynamics, SharePoint Online, any Microsoft cloud service that you subscribe to, you will get an Azure Active Directory tenant for that service so that you can create accounts and identities for that service, and you can use Azure Active Directory to authenticate and authorize those accounts and identities. So I'll select security group. I'll enter the name of the group. I can say this is my, let's say, operations. That's my group. Or I can say SOC operations. Group description, what it is optional. If you want to push, you can put it. Membership type assigned. Owners. So you need to select owner of the group. Now let's assume the first user that you have created is also an owner. We will make this user an owner. So we'll select owner as, don't select your username, the one with which you signed up to Azure Sponsorship Pass. You should not be using that username because that's the account admin. As per the security best practices, account admin credentials should not be used for day-to-day functionality of the Active Directory or day-to-day Azure functionality. You should preserve them. You should use them as a break class account. So I will make my first user as owner of this group. And members I will add later on. So I've created the group. So my group is created. SOC operations group is created now. Let's move on. Let's create some additional users. Same process. I'll copy the password here itself, auto-generated password, and put it for my second user. Fill in the information, at least the name, first name and last name. The rest of the information I can leave as it is, and type the usage location. And for this user, I'm not providing any role to this user because they are my normal users, or they are my L1, L2 users. So I don't want to grant them access to Azure Active Directory, but I will add them to a group. So I will add now these users to SOC operations group, and I will create this user. So my second user is also created. So I click on the username, and from here I can copy the user login ID, which is user principal name. And put it here. So I've got the user principal name also for this user. Okay. So in the same manner, I will need to create a couple of users. I would rather put it on the transcript. Provisioned couple of users can group. Assign them license. Okay, so I've got two users created. Now I'll create one more user. I'm saying you will need to at least have 5, 6 users, guys. Then only it would make sense. So I'll create one more user. And this user also, I'll add this user to the same group, which is SOC operations. Created. That user got created. I'll create another user. Okay, so I've got 4 users created. I'll create one more group, which is my admin group, because this is my SOC operations group. So typically users who are part of this group, they are my team members. They're kind of L1, L2, L3 team members. I'll create a separate group for my admins also. For my, let's say, SOC operations is my operations team, admin is my engineering team, people who are responsible for building, deploying, and architecting the solution. So I can say admin, I can say Sentinel admin. So Sentinel admin is another group that I'm creating. And for this group, I'm not selecting the member and owners now, just create a group. So the group is created. Now I'll create additional users, 2 more users, and add them to this group. So they'll become admin and the remaining 3 users become my operations team people. So this new user, I add this user to Sentinel admin group because this is my Sentinel admin. I'll create one more user. I'll add this user also to Sentinel admin group. Okay, I forgot to make a note of the User credentials, that's okay. I can take that later on. Okay, so I've got a couple of users now. So you can fill in the information here. And group membership details also. So just keep a record here that, what user you have created, what is the login ID for the user, password. Every time the user logs in, the first time when the user logs in, you will change the password. So keep the same password for all the users because you will need to log in with all the users once in a while so that you will have sufficient sign-in logs and audit logs getting created. So password, you can just keep a record of the temporary password here, but the actual password you don't need to type. Just keep the same password for all the users. And it has to be a difficult password, otherwise Azure will not accept it. So we have created this information. Discard the notepad now. All right. So okay, there is no option to see the group information here, group membership. Each group assign license. Can add assign license. All right, so now that my users are created, I've got a couple of users created here, and you can see, let me remove the site entity, edit column. Okay, now the default view shows you the display name, user principal name, user type. Now user type shows member because they all are created in cloud. On-premise synchronized? No, they were not synchronized from on-premises. Company name, here you can see, because we have not mentioned the company name, so this field is blank. Creation type is blank. Assigned license is no. Now, if you want to add more, more columns to this dashboard, you can click on Manage View, Edit Columns, and here you can click on Add Columns, and you can add more information here. So I would remove this company name, creation type. Okay. So now this is the information that I need to look for. All right. So this is what we have created. Now we have got a couple of users. We will need to assign them. We will need to make sure that they are members of the respective group. So let's see, Kishan. I'm say when you click on the username, you see the user properties. Here you can see under manage the group that the user belongs to. So you can see that this user belongs to SOC operations group. Similarly, all the users should belong to one of the group. So you can see what this user belongs to. This user also belongs to SOC operations. This user Ramkumar doesn't belong to any group. You can see under group, it says no group. So we can click on add membership and we can select the group. So we can make him Sentinel admin. It says successfully added group membership. It will refresh in some time. Okay, he's here, Sentinel admin. Similarly, this user, SOC operations. All right. So we've got users created. Now what you need to do, guys, you don't need to do all of it today. I'm saying right now, you just understand what we are trying to build so that in your spare time, you can continue to build it because we would need it probably tomorrow, not today. So that's what you need to do. So you will need to create a couple of users uh, and then create at least 2, 3 groups and assign those users to the group. Every user must be a part of a group. Now, once that part is done, my next is that my Sentinel admin group, they are my admin users. So I'm going to assign them contributor access to the subscription, contributor RBAC. My SOC operations group members, they are my L1, L2 team members. I'm going to assign them reader access to Azure subscription so that when they are troubleshooting an incident, and if they would need to navigate to a specific service to look for its configuration, they will be able to do that. For that, they would need read-only access. So I will follow the principle of least privilege, which is one of the security best practice in identity and access management domain. And I will only grant as needed access to my users based on their job role and functionalities. And that is exactly what happens in the production environment. So we are trying to build a replica of production here so that you will understand why, if you are into operations, you have limited access. What is the background of it, why you were provided limited access, or what is your current access level? You will be able to understand all of it. So for example, now I'm going to assign the access. So for that, now if you are done with creating a group, please focus on my screen. How do I assign an RBAC to a user or a group for our Azure subscription? This is how we do it. So in the search for subscription, it will take you to subscription blade, and you will only see one subscription here. And you will see your security score also now that you have enabled Defender yesterday, and I hope you have some resources. So it will also show you your secure score, which is 33%, very bad. Any organization should target to have a secure score of 85% and above, not 100%. It's not possible. And it is possible, but then it would cause you a lot of money, because in order to get 100% secure score, you will need to enable a couple of additional services in cloud in Azure, which are very costly, and you may not need them. There is no use case for them. So anything which is 85% and above secure score is more than sufficient. So we'll select the subscription, and in the subscription, there's an option on the overview blade that says access control, IAM. This is the option that you need to use. So you will click on access control, and on access control, you will see the window from where you can see who all have access to the subscription, or if you want to add new members, you can also do that. So there is an option that says grant access to this resource. In the middle of the screen, there's a box that says grant access to this resource, and there's a button that says add role assignment. If you don't see it here, then on the top, there is a button that says add. When you click on it, it also shows in the drop down add role assignment. So we'll click on add role assignment. Now, when we click on add role assignment, it shows me all the roles. Microsoft Azure has 200 plus RBACs, role-based access control. It has subscription-specific RBAC and service-specific RBAC also. What you see under privileged administrator role, the tab after job function, there's a tab that says privileged administrator role. These roles are subscription-specific roles. If you assign an identity one of these roles, then the role's scope is at the subscription level. The entire subscription, they get access to the entire subscription. However, if you assign somebody RBAC, which is job function role, let's say I'll type network. Now these are the network related RBAC. If I make somebody as network contributor, if I assign this RBAC to an identity, that identity will be able to manage networks but not access to them. So that identity will become network contributor, and the identity will be able to manage most of the networking services. When I say manage, the identity will be able to provision it, modify it, delete it, recreate it. So that's the contributor access. This is known as service specific access, resource specific access, because here you will only get access to networking services. Or if I type storage, then I see storage related services. So this is my storage account. Now these are my storage account related roles. For example, this is storage account contributor. Now somebody who has this RBAC, storage account contributor, will be able to manage storage accounts, including accessing storage account keys, which provides full access to storage account data. So the person becomes storage account admin with this RBAC, but only the storage account service or resource. not the entire Azure. So these are job function roles and these are privileged roles, which are at the subscription level. So I will assign contributor role to my Sentinel admin group so that all the members of that group will become contributor on this subscription. And they need contributor rights because they will need to do a lot of configuration before they enable the Sentinel service. So we'll do contributor. So we've selected contributor, then we'll select the members. So when you click on members, you see a pop-up to your right. And in that pop-up, you can select your group. So you can type your group name and it will populate Sentinel admin. So I'm making Sentinel admin group as contributor on this subscription. That's it. You've selected the group, which is now here. Click on next. It will say that can a job function role with less access be used instead? And say Azure is just suggesting you that you're assigning contributor, which is an admin role. Can you not assign a low level, low access role, job function role? So I will ignore it because I actually need my Sentinel admin to be a contributor. So I will assign it. So my role assignments has been added, which means all the members of Sentinel admin group are now contributor on the subscription, contributor on this subscription. Similarly, I will add another role assignment. I'll be back on the same screen. Then I will click on add role assignment once again, and I will assign reader role to all the members of my SOC operations group. So I'll select reader role, which is role-based access control, owner, contributor access. So reader role you don't see here. So you will go to job function role and type reader. And you can see role here, reader, that says view all resources, but does not allow you to make any changes. So my operations team member needs to view the resources and their configurations. And if there is any change that is needed, then they will connect with the service or resource owner so that a change request can be raised. It can be duly looked into and approved by the change advisory board, and a schedule can be identified to make that configuration changes. So I will select reader role. And for the members, select members, I'll select my SOC group, SOC operations group, and select it. Next, and then assign it. So I have assigned reader role to SOC operations group and contributor role to Sentinel admin group. As per the security best practice, you should not assign individual RBAC or individual permissions to an identity. You should always assign permissions at group level and add identities or users to a group so that it is easier for you to manage. If you assign permissions at individual level, imagine the administrative overhead that you will have in the long run when there are thousands of users. So that is why we use this. So now that we have assigned access, we have created users, we have added them to specific group. That part is done. My next part is to grant licenses to these users also. If I don't grant licenses to these users, then the sign-in logs or the audit logs from these identities will never ever reach Sentinel. That's a prerequisite from Sentinel. So how do I assign license? I can assign license at the group level or at the individual user level also. So I'll follow the best practice. My best practice is that I will assign license at the group level so that all the users in that group will get the license. So I will click on licenses in the Azure Active Directory to validate whether I have licenses. Yes, it says no group assignment error found. So licenses are there. I can see. Now I'll navigate to the specific group or to the user. So I'll navigate to the group which needs the license. So example, Sentinel admin group. I'll click on the group name. It will open the group blade, and on the group blade under manage, there is an option that says license. And same is the case with users. if you click on any username, on the user blade under manage, there's an option that says licenses. So you can assign licenses from here. So I would rather go to group and assign license at the group level. So I'll select Sentinel admin group. These are my admin group members. So I will assign them the highest license, which is premium P2. So I'll click on licenses. It says no license assigned. I'll click on assignments and I'll select the license. So I'll select Azure AD Premium P2. Okay, learn how to activate license assignments to the group. I think we need to do some additional steps. So we have paid or trial subscription, which is good. Required number of licenses. Okay, that is okay. You're just telling me how what it is, but how can I assign? Group-based licenses and no. And through this is okay. I don't personal license verification user groups. In some cases, it's not user. Okay. So you will need to assign license to the group from a different blade. And so they have changed the view. Earlier, you can directly assign the license from here, but now Microsoft. So that's what Microsoft, that's what cloud is all about. They do a lot of changes. So if you want to assign license to a user directly, then you just need to navigate to that user. And on the user blade, click on licenses and then plus click on assignment, and you can select the license that you want to assign to the user. Since you have taken the trial and you're not paying anything for it, you can also assign premium P2, or you can select one of these options. For example, I don't want premium P2, but I want this user to have premium P1 and my multi-factor authentication and Defender for Cloud App Discovery license. So that's how you can select the license and you can assign it. However, I don't want this license to be assigned individually to the users. I want these licenses to be assigned at the group level. So I will not do it from here. I would rather follow what the article says. So the article, the documentation says the change is from here now. So you will need to click on licenses, and here you will need to click on under manage. There is an option that says all products. And when you click on all products, you will see all the licenses that you have as we speak. So since we have only subscribed to Azure Active Directory Premium P2 trial license, we'll select it. We'll select it and then we will click on assign. This assign option from here. And in the assign option, now I can select users in group. So I'll click on add users in group, and this shows all my users. Where is my group? Assignment options. No. Okay, try changing or adding filters if you don't see what you're looking for. Yes, I don't see what I'm looking for. I don't see my groups. So I still don't see my groups. It says users, and I've not put any filter here. Let's see the document once again. So it says select the license, select a user or group, select button at the bottom of the page to confirm your selection. When assigning license to a group, the service plan that have dependencies. On the assign license page, click on assignment options. Okay, so this is where you need to select the license. All right, what article says we are following the same step. We are on the same window. However, somehow it says add user and group. I click on this. However, I don't see my groups here. I only see my users, all my users, not groups. So something is missing here. Maybe some synchronization issue is there, because of which I'm not able to assign licenses. So what I will do, I would rather assign licenses manually. Let me just refresh the portal. Maybe that will resolve the issue. Okay, great. I refresh the portal and it resolved the issue. Now I can see my groups. So guys, this is what you need to remember. Whenever you are stuck in Azure, whenever things don't work as expected, refresh the portal, sign out and sign back in. It will start to work because it happens because of synchronization. So now I can see my groups. So I'll select my group, Sentinel Admin, and I will assign Sentinel Admin the premium P2 license. So I will keep all the licenses on and assign it. So Sentinel Admin group is assigned premium P2 license. I'll go back to the same screen, licenses, all products, select the license, hit assign, and select the other group now. Now I'll select SOP operations group and I will assign it premium P1 license. So premium P2 I turned off and P1 you can see I'm assigning. These are the default services which is already part of both premium P1 and P2. So I'm turning it off premium P2 and premium P1 I'm assigning to these users. That's it. So license assignment is also complete. It says license has been assigned. Now, so I have assigned the licenses. If you want to validate whether those licenses have been assigned or not, you can quickly validate by navigating to a specific user or a group and you will see the license. So let's say if I go to the group, Sentinel admin, on the group properties blade under license, I will see the license that yes, this is premium P2 license. However, it says license and changes are pending, which basically means that it is allocating the license in the backend, which will be completed in next couple of minutes. So my Sentinel admin has premium P2 and my SOC operations, they have, you can see here, they also have, it also shows premium P2 license. However, you can see enabled services. Here you will need to know what has been enabled. So you can see I've only enabled premium P1, not the P2. It always shows the license that you have purchased, not what you have assigned. So this is where I have assigned out of 4 services, I have only assigned 3. So premium P2 I have not assigned. So we are done with provisioning users. We are done with assigning them access at both Azure Active Directory as well as to the subscription level based on the group membership that they have. We have also enabled free trial of Azure AD Premium P2, and then we have assigned licenses to the groups, I'm saying to the users, but from the group so that the users get the license. Now the group have the license. If you want to validate whether a user has got the license, you can quickly validate. So example, this user, Christian. If I navigate to this user properties and under manage, if I click on license, you will see the license for the user. So you can see the license is premium P2. It is active. 3 services are enabled, which means this Kishan Kumar is actually part of SOC operations team because it has premium P1 license and the assignment path is inherited. So there is no direct license assignment. This user is inheriting the license from SOC operations group. So that's what assignment path basically means. If I assign a direct license to this user, then it will show under assignment as direct. So the licenses are now assigned. You can also see the group membership of this user, which is SOC operations. So from the users blade, you can see all of it. Now that you have enabled licenses, you have created users, all you need to do is for those users to at least sign in once or twice. And then the audit logs and sign-in logs will start getting created in Azure Active Directory. And we will stream those logs to Microsoft Sentinel service when we will build the service. So that's what we need to do. Is my screen visible now to everyone? I'll open Azure portal once again. And now I will sign out from my account and I will sign in using the users that I have created. What you can do in order to avoid signing out from your account, you can rather open another browser and you can do this activity on that browser. So I'll open Edge. Do I not have Edge? Okay, so I'm opening Edge, and on the Edge, I will open Azure portal. Whatever services and resources are we configuring today, we will need to keep them till the end of this training. I will specifically tell you what service and resource you can turn off at the end of the day to save cost. So I will now log in. What is this ID? Okay, let me sign out. All right, now I will log in using my users. So I log in using my first user, which is Ram Kumar. This is how I log in. I'll type the user principal name, which is the email for the user, and I'll click on next. This is taken. I'll type the password, which is my temporary password. As soon as I type the password, it will ask me to reset the password. I'm saying since for Microsoft, it is the user who is logging in for the first time, and user will need to reset the password so that only user have that password. Admin should not have that password. So I'm resetting the password now. So I've reset the password. I'll sign in. Now that's the challenge. It says we have seen this password too many times. We choose anything, something harder to guess. So I'll give you a trick. Just open a random password generator on your system, generate the password, and use that password for all the users. Or close your eyes, put your keys, put your hands on the keyboard, and randomly type some characters, 15, 16 characters, a combination of letters and numbers, and then use that password. So that's my random password that it has generated. I'll just copy this password. And I'll use this password. Okay, it will be taken. The password is taken. So what I will do, I will also make a note of this password. Otherwise, I'll myself forget it. I cannot show you. So I'll put it on separate screen. Okay. Now it says action required. Now this is where Microsoft Azure is basically trying to educate the user that we have got a couple of security capabilities available. Why don't you go ahead and try them? For example, you can use Microsoft Authenticator for MFA. So Microsoft gives you this information when the user logs in for the first time. However, user will have 14 days until this is required. So for next 14 days, this user can work without any trouble. So the user will click on ask later. And when the user will click on ask later, user will be logged into the portal. So now the user is logged into Azure. This is your Azure subscription pass to which the user is logged in. Now you can see here on the top, you will see the username, and then at the bottom, you will see default directory and your name. I'm saying your email address with which you signed up for Azure sponsorship pass. And when the user validates, user can type subscriptions and see, yes, the user has access to a subscription. And you can see a role of the user. For you, it is account admin. For this user, it says specified access. Now, what is the role of the user on this account? User can quickly verify by clicking on its name. It opens a drop down, and right next to switch directory, there are three dots. User can click on those three dots, and then it opens a drop down once again, and the option says my permissions. User can click on my permissions, and it will show the current access of the user. So you can see this user, Ram Kumar, is part of Sentinel admin group, and this user has been granted contributor access on the subscription. So this user is a contributor. This user has contributor access on the subscription. So that's how you will need to make sure that you will log in with all the users at least once and keep the same password for all the users, because only you know, nobody else will know, and you will be using those users yourself. So do that thing. Now, once that part is done, then we'll go to the next level of it, but not today. Probably when the Sentinel is configured, we will have some virtual machines configured in other geographies. For example, users base location is India. Then I'll have a virtual machine configured, hosted in East US. From inside the virtual machine OS, I'll open Azure portal and I will log in using the same user account, and then it will be an anomaly. There will be a log in Azure Active Directory that the user signed in from a location which is different than the usage location. And we will have a connector in Sentinel, and we will have a rule in Sentinel that will quickly create an incident against this usage, against this log. And then the L1 team will pick up that incident, will see the details of the incident. If required, will connect with the user to understand if it is the user who just signed in or somebody else. If the user says that, yes, I have just signed in from East US because I'm traveling to Washington for a business meeting, then the incident will be closed as resolved because it is an expected behavior. So that's what we are going to do. That's the drill that we need to follow. Okay. So you will need to make sure that you use all the users one after another to sign in. This is what we need to do at the Active Directory level. So does everyone understand what we need to do at the Active Directory level? Assign them Azure AD license and subscription RBAC. Okay, this is what we need to do. So I've just mentioned what we are doing here. Now, if you've understood the process and you can do it in your spare time, let's move on and we will move on to the next step that we need to do, next task that we need to do. Now, the next step is, so we are done with the Active Directory part. Now we will need to move on to the next, which is compute service. So before we create a virtual machine in Azure, you need a network. You need a virtual network actually. So we will need to build a virtual network first, and then we will create virtual machines inside the network. And that's exactly what I told you the other day, that you will need to have basic understanding, or you will need to have good comfort level with the core services of Microsoft Azure before you start to learn any management or monitoring or security services, because the core will come into the picture. So how do we provision a virtual network? We will search for virtual network in the search. Here you see virtual networks, and you will see this is the virtual network blade, where you will see a couple of virtual networks if they are there in the account. If there is no virtual network, it will say no virtual network. So what you need to do, I thought you reset. You'll be starting again 30, 40, no, not in 30, 40 minutes. Okay, so we will need to provision a virtual network now. How do I provision a virtual network? It is very simple and straight in Microsoft Azure. We just need to click on create. When you hit create, now one thing that you need to remember here, before you create a virtual network, you need a resource group. So let me, resource group. Now, what is this resource group? A resource group is a container. It's a container that hosts all the resources, all the related resources, you can say, related resources. So let's say you are working on a project or you are building resources for specific initiative. What you will do, you will first create a resource group, and then all the resources related to that initiative, project, business unit, or customer will be kept in the same resource group. So you will keep everything, you will provision all the resources in the same resource group, so that whenever you need to get rid of resources related to that project, you will delete the resource group and it will delete all the resources automatically. So it will first delete the resources and then delete the resource group. It is like files and folders. So we keep files inside the folder. When we delete the folder, it will first delete all the files and then the folder. So, but if your files are scattered on your computer and somebody asks you to delete them, it will take you a lot of time to first search for those files and then delete them. So that is why, it is very important for you to use resource group. And in Azure, using a resource group is mandatory. You cannot provision a resource without a resource group. A resource will be contained inside a resource group always. So we first create a resource group and then we create resources. Okay. The second thing is, it is not only for a life cycle management of resources that you can delete them all, you keep them all at one place and then you can delete them all in one go. There are more use cases to a resource group. The other use case is billing and chargeback. Let's say there is a department, there is a specific department in the company, and they want to do some POC on Azure, proof of concept. For them, for that, they would need to provision a couple of services. So they need certain budget. Let's say as the finance admin, you will allocate $1,000 to the department and say, I'll give you $1,000 of budget in Azure. Go ahead and do your POC. So what they will do, they will create a resource group, or you will create a resource group for them and say, whatever resources you are provisioning as part of this POC, make sure that you provision them inside the same resource group. So that as a finance admin, you will always have visibility on the billing, that what is the current billing of this resource group. And if that billing exceeds $1,000, or if it reaches 80%, 90%, you can quickly intimate the project or POC admin that, you know what, you asked for $1,000, we gave you $1,000. You said it will take 3 months. That it has been 2 months. 30 days are still left, and you've already reached to $800 or $900. 90% of the budget you've already exhausted. Do you need more budget, or can you optimize the resources to contain the cost so that you don't unnecessarily exhaust the budget? Because we may not be able to provide you more budget. So it also helps you in billing and chargeback also. If there are multiple resource groups, and if your company has decentralized, P&L, wherein each business unit has its own P&L, then you can request business units to provision resources in a specific resource group tagged to that business unit, and you can quickly use the billing. I said you can quickly get the details of the cost of that resource group and charge it back to that specific business unit. So resource group has multiple use cases. It helps you manage resources in an organized manner. It helps you with billing and chargeback. It also helps you in security also. You can apply security policies or controls based on the resource group. You can also grant access to identities based on the resource group. Let's say there are two users who need access to Azure to perform that POC. So you will create their user accounts and you will grant them access to that resource group only, which means outside of that resource group, users will not be able to see anything in Azure. So that's the another use case of resource group. There are multiple use cases for resource group. So what we will need to do, we will first need to create a resource group and create all the resources inside that resource group. So let's do that. So first, we will search for resource group We'll type resource in the search bar, and it will take us to the resource group Blade. Now, some participants who have good knowledge of Azure will feel that this is an unnecessarily or this is a redundant information, but I'm doing it for those participants who said on day one that they have not worked with Azure. They absolutely have very little or no knowledge of Azure. So just to bring them on the same page, I'm just explaining it to you. Okay, so we'll hit create, and here we will need to type the name of the resource group. Let's say I'll keep the resource group name as DXC Sentinel. So name of the resource group should be kept so that we can recognize that what that resource group is, what is the purpose of it. So DXC Sentinel is my resource group name, and I will need to select a region for my resource group. I can select a region, and then I can provision resources in any region. It is not, there is no restriction that the resources inside a resource group should be in the same region. You can provision resources in any region. Resource group is nothing but a container. It will only contain the metadata of this resource group in that region. But resources inside this resource group can be configured for any region. So we'll select East US. Next is tag. Tag is very important in Azure. They will also help you with billing and chargeback, with security, with a lot of functionalities. So tag is very important in Azure. What you will do, you will put a tag so that when somebody looks at your resource, they can read the tag and they can find out who does this resource group belong to, who does this resource belongs to, what is the purpose of it, what is the validity, whether this needs to be deleted or retained, and so you can put tags. So I typically put two tags, which are very common tags. First is owner of the resource group or owner of the resource, and second, purpose. You need to type owner. This is key value pair. So you put owner as key and the value is your name. Purpose is key and the value is Microsoft Sentinel training. So I'll put two tags here, and then I'll hit next, which is review plus create. It will validate the information that I have just provided. And if the information is correct, it will just create the resource group. You will hit create and resource group will be created. So the resource group is now created. You can refresh the screen and see your resource group. So I've created the resource group. Now I will provision the network. So after the resource group is created, I'll go to virtual networks, and I will click on create. Here I'll provision a virtual network. So on the resource group, now when you provision a resource in Azure, some fields are mandatory. For example, subscription name is mandatory, resource group is mandatory, and then the resource specific properties that you need to provide. These two things, subscription and resource group, will be common to all the resource provisioning dashboard, and you will need to provide. So subscription is by default selected because you only have one subscription, but resource group you will need to choose from the drop down. So I select my resource group, which is DXC Sentinel, and then I will put the name of my network. So my network is, let's say, DXC. And so whatever network name you want to put, I can say Sentinel underscore VNet. So that's the name of my network. Region is East US. Next is IP address. This is where I will need to provide address space for my network. That what will be the address space of my network. You can see here by default, it takes the address space, which is class A private IP address range. And by default, it is creating a subnet, a default subnet, which with this range. That's what it is doing. Now it is for those users who don't have good understanding of networking, right? So I assume that you have good understanding of networking and you don't want to go with the default. You want to build something of your own. So I would rather suggest you to delete this default address space and use a class C private IP address space, which is 192.168.1. Or you can say whatever one dot. The third octet could be anything. So let's say 11.0/24. So that's your class C private IP address space. This address space gives me 256 IP addresses. And now I will add subnets. Subnet, as I told you yesterday, we create a network and then we segment that network into multiple subnets so that we can use those subnets to host resources. So we'll click on subnets and it opens a pop-up to my right where I need to provide the subnet name. So I can put a subnet name like web-subnet, in which I'll keep my all web servers, and I can select a range for the subnet as 192.168.11.0/27. Now this /27 basically means I'll get 32 IP addresses in this subnet. Azure will reserve 5 IP addresses, first 4 and last IP addresses for its internal purposes, and I will be able to use 27 IP addresses from this subnet. That's what this means. So I'll hit add. So this subnet is created. Now I will need at least one subnet in my network when I provision it. I can add more subnets at a later stage or at this stage also by clicking on add subnet again and again and typing the range address space for the subnet. So I'll just keep one subnet here, hit next. Now this tab is very important, the security tab. You are not enabling any of these services in security tab. Why? A, we don't need these services as we speak. B, these services are very costly. For example, Bastion host will cost you around $3 to $5 per day. DDoS will cost you $90 to $100 per day. So if you enable this service and provision this network, trust me, by tomorrow, you will not have even a single penny left in your account because this is very expensive service. So let's not enable it. Same is the case with firewall. Firewall will also charge you some $5 to $10 a day. So let's not enable any of these services. Let's keep them disabled. I'm repeating once again. When you are provisioning a virtual network, do not enable any service on the security tab. Let them be disabled. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes.
Okay, great. Look at the cost of DDoS. So East US dollars, that's the cost. Monthly charges, which is 2944. 2944 divided by 30 comes around $90+. So within a day, your entire credit will get exhausted if you enable this service by any chance. That is why you should not enable this service. Next is tag. Now, tags are optional. It is not mandatory. But as a best practice, we always tag our resources so that others can identify who does this resource belong to and what is the purpose of this resource. So I'll always put tags, owner, myself, purpose. Now, when you have put tag once, you will always see those tags in the drop down. You don't need to type them again. For example, you can see I'm just picking up from the drop down. I'll just put my mouse cursor there, click on the box, and I pick up from the drop down. I don't need to type it again and again. That's it. So after I provide the tag, I will run the final validation, which will check the information that I have supplied. If it is correct as per the nomenclature, then it will say validation passed. and I will be able to create my network. So that's how I'm creating my network. So my network is created. All right, my network is created. So we will need at least one virtual network to host virtual machines. However, I would recommend you to create 5, 6 virtual networks. Just write it down as an assignment that after this training is over, after the session is over for today, you will need to complete the pending task. So we are creating one virtual network in the session so that we can proceed further with the next service that we need to provision. But you will need at least 5, 6 virtual networks to be provisioned so that we can send enough data to Sentinel. So my
Hello.
virtual is provisioned. Yes.
Yeah. So I just create review and create. I'm on the review and create page. I have
Mhm.
disabled this DDoS, but still in it is in security showing me as basic and not disabled.
So basic means basic is the default DDoS protection that Azure provides to all the customers. And basic is free of cost. If you
Okay.
had enabled that box, then it would have shown you advanced. And advanced is where you charge, where you get charged for it. So basic is by default available in Azure to all the customers, free of cost.
Okay. Got it.
All right, so my network is created. I'll just wait for a minute for all the participants to be on the same page. And guys, if you are stuck, if you're not able to follow me, if you're not able to provision these services, I would recommend you to take help from your colleagues who you think have knowledge of service provisioning in Microsoft Azure. It doesn't harm to seek assistance and ask for help. Okay, so we are done with the virtual network provisioning. As I said, you will need to provision a couple of virtual networks, 5, 6 virtual networks that you need to provision. And when you are provisioning virtual networks, please make sure you do not select the same address space. It has to be a different address space. You should not create virtual networks with coinciding or overlapping address spaces. So now we are going to provision a couple of virtual machines. When I say a couple of, you will not be able to provision more than 4 because we have a limit of 4 CPU cores, 4 virtual CPU cores in Azure free trial or sponsorship. So we will only be able to provision 4 virtual machines. Now what we will do, we will provision 3 Windows and 1 Linux so that we also understand the Linux part of it, the capability of Sentinel with respect to Linux instances. Okay, how do I provision a virtual machine? I will navigate to virtual machine blade. I'll search for virtual machine in the search bar and I'll see my virtual machines if there is any. So I have one virtual machine already running. I'm set to one virtual machine running, the other is stopped. And in total, you can see how many CPU I'm using. Now, on all the service dashboard, you will see this option, which is manage view. From here, you can click on edit columns and you can add more information on this view itself. Example, I want to see how many CPU cores I'm already consuming. So I'll click on add column and I'll select the CPU. So there is no option to see the CPU. That's okay. So I can see both the virtual machines are B2MS. That's the size of the virtual machine. I can click on the virtual machine and see what is the CPU utilization, CPU usage. So you can see this virtual machine has over here under size on the overview tab to your right under size, it says standard V2MS and the vCPUs are 2 VP CPUs. So this is already using 2 virtual CPUs. There is no limit on the RAM. The limit is on the CPUs. So I'm already using 2 CPUs on this virtual machine and another 2 CPUs on the other virtual machines, which means if I provision the third virtual machine, I'll get an error that I don't have CPUs available. So let's try and provision the virtual machine. So this is how we provision a virtual machine. We will hit create and select Azure virtual machine. It will open the provisioning page for virtual machines, wherein I will need to fill in the information. So same. Now, since we are not learning virtual machines here, we will only fill in the required information in these tabs and skip the rest of the information. So for resource group, you will select your resource group, which is DXC Sentinel. Virtual machine name, you can put your virtual machine name. Depending on the OS that it contains, put the name. So Win 2K16, or sorry, 19. This is my name, Win 2K19, which basically means that this virtual machine is containing Windows 2019 server. So Win 2K19 is the name of the virtual machine. Region, East US. Under availability options, you will select no infrastructure redundancy required. Under security type, you will select standard. Don't select trusted launch virtual machine. Select standard. And then in the image, this is where you need to select the operating system. So let's first provision Windows. So it's Windows 2019. I'll select Windows 2019. Now Windows 2019 x64 data center generation 2 is what I'll select. So I've selected it. Then I will need to select the size of the virtual machine. So these are the sizes which are available. Standard D2S V3, 2 CPU core, 8 GB RAM, 1 CPU core, 3.5 GB RAM, all of these sizes. So I'll select the size which is 1 CPU core. And then you need to provide the username and password for the machine, which is the administrator username and password. So provide the username and password. And please make sure that you remember it. This username and password you will use to log into the machine. You have provided the username and password. Rest of the information will remain as it is. You're not making any changes on this tab. So once again, on the basics tab, you're putting the resource group, name of the virtual machine, region. Under availability option, it has to be no infrastructure redundancy. Under security type, it is standard. In the image, you will select Windows 2019 data center. In the size, you will select any size, but do not go beyond 2 CPU cores. Try and see if there is 1 CPU core size available. Check, use that size. Then username and password you need to type. That's it on this tab, on the basics tab. Then we move on to the next tab, which is disk. On this tab, we will basically select the storage that our virtual machine would require to store operating system files, which is known as disk in Azure. So you will select the disk. So OS disk type, it is by default selecting premium SSD, which is very expensive. So I would rather select standard SSD, which is mid. I'm saying you have 3 sizes: premium SSD, standard SSD, and standard HDD. HDD stands for hard disk drive. It's magnetic disk, which we used to use in the old times. Premium SSD is solid state drive. It's SSD. It has high performance, low throughput, but it is very expensive. So we choose the middle one, which is standard SSD. That's it. Nothing else you need to select on this tab. Only you need to select OS disk type at standard SSD. Then comes the next tab, which is networking. On networking tab, you will need to select the network in which you want this machine to be provisioned in. So I'll select my network, which is DXC Sentinel. Which is Sentinel VNet, the one that I've created. And I'll select the subnet. Since I only have one subnet in this network, that subnet is by default selected. Under public IP, it will take a new public, it will create a public IP. Why it will create a public IP? Because I don't have a VPN from my laptop to this Azure virtual machine. So I will not be able to take remote of it, RDP into it. And that is why I'll use a public IP on the VM so that I can connect to it. And this public IP is also an anomaly. It's a security misconfiguration. It is not recommended for virtual machines to have public IP, which means we're giving some food for thought to Sentinel service also, which will capture this anomaly and will show you in its dashboard that we have a couple of virtual machines with public IP. Now, because of this public IP, we will see a lot of brute force attack on this VM that Sentinel will capture and will show in its dashboard that there has been some events related to this VM. And when you look into those events, you will find a brute force attack wherein somebody from the internet is trying to connect or log into the VM by supplying incorrect combination of user ID and password, and that will be captured by Sentinel. So we are doing it intentionally. All right. Rest of the information will remain as it is, no changes. Yes, you need to select this checkbox, delete public IP and NIC when VM is deleted. Why? So that whenever you delete this VM, all its underlying resources also gets deleted. So on the networking tab, you're selecting your network, subnet, and you're checking this box which says delete public IP and NIC when the VM is deleted. That's it. No changes on the networking tab. Then comes the fourth tab, which is management. No changes here. Leave it as it is. Fifth tab, which is monitoring. No changes. Leave it as it is. Sixth tab, advanced. No changes. Leave as it is. Seventh tag, same tags, owner, myself, purpose, Sentinel training. That's it. And after tags, you will always have the last tab as review plus create. So hit review plus create. This will quickly validate the configuration that you have supplied, and it will. So the validation passed. You can also see one warning here that says you have set RDP ports open to internet. And I'm doing this intentionally because A, I don't have VPN, B, I want Sentinel to capture this. So my validation passed, I'll hit create. So this is how I provision a virtual machine in Azure. Now, when I hit create, it will provision the virtual machine. The reason it has not given me an error because the other virtual machine is shut down. So right now the active usage is only 2 CPU cores in my case. But if the other virtual machine was up and running, I would not be able to provision this virtual machine because I can only use 4 CPU cores. All right, so my machine is provisioned. If I go back to the virtual machine blade, I'll see my machine there, which is Win2K 2019. You can see it's here. It's running and it is using DS12. So my machine is provisioned. Now, similar to this, I will need to provision at least 4 machines. So let me quickly provision the other machine, which is, let's say, 2022.
Raghuveer, I have a question. Can I ask it?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So suppose we have created a virtual machine like you have created one previously, and you have added it to a particular virtual LAN. Do we have the capability of changing that VLAN and adding another one?
You want to say, do we have the capability to move the virtual machine from its existing VLAN to another VLAN?
Yes.
Yes, not from the portal, but there's a workaround. I'm saying there is no direct option to change the network of a machine. You can change the subnetwork. So you can move the machine. So VLAN is equivalent to subnet, not network. Virtual network is LAN and subnet is VLAN. So you can move the machine from one VLAN to another, which means from web subnet to F subnet or DB subnet within the same LAN. But if you want to move the machine to a different LAN, different VNet, then you will need to delete the machine, retain the OS disk of the machine and all the data disk, and re-provision the machine in the other network, other LAN or other VNet using the same OS disk, and then attach the data disk manually once the machine is provisioned. So there is a workaround to achieve this objective, but there is no direct option on the portal, Azure portal, to do this. For example, if you go to this virtual machine, let's say this one, you can see it says resource group move. You can move this virtual machine to a different resource group. You can move this virtual machine to a different subscription also. It says move, but against virtual network, it doesn't give you an option to move anywhere. This is your virtual network in subnet. See, there is no option to move it. So you cannot move this virtual machine outside of this network. If you want to move it, delete the virtual machine, retain the OS and data disk, and then re-provision the virtual machine in the other network. That's the right approach, or that's the only option which is available in Azure. Make sense?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, also, can we change the size of?
Yeah, we can change the size of the machine. You should change the size of the machine when the machine is stopped, because if you change the size of a machine while it is running, it may corrupt the application. It may corrupt the data also. Because when you change the size of the machine reboots. It is rebooted. What if you are copying some data on the machine and all of a sudden the Azure admin resizes the machine, changes the size, the machine will reboot, so your copy operation will get interrupted. And that may result in loss of data or corruption. So for example, this machine is running now. I know that there is absolutely nothing you have on this machine. We have just created it, no application, so we can change the size. So under settings on the overview page, you have an option that says size here. You need to click on size. And here you will see all the sizes which are available for this machine. So we have sizes, we have category of sizes, which is like general purpose, memory optimized, compute optimized, GPU optimized, storage optimized. So these are the sizes. So you can see most used by Azure, D series, B series. So you can select any of these series and you can select that size and change it. Now, whenever you click on size, you will always see the current size of the machine will be selected. So this is my current size, which is one CPU core, 3.5 GB of RAM. This is my current size, but I can change this side also. I can make it 2, but I cannot make it 4 CPU core. Why? Because when I try to do it, I might get an error stating that I do not have sufficient cores available or sufficient quota available in this subscription. Let's try to resize. And when you are changing the size, please make sure of the cost per month also. The current size that I had, the cost of that size was 7,233 rupees 60 paisa per month. And the size that I've just chosen, which is 4 times of the configuration, and the cost is 21,556. Okay, so the virtual machine is resized, which makes me believe that maybe Microsoft has removed limitation from sponsorship pass with respect to the CPU cores. Okay, so virtual machine has been resized. You can see here it is now DS4v3. So it says updating. So it is currently doing the update in the backend. So this is how we change the size. We should always change the size of the machine when it is stopped, or first stop the machine and then change the size and then turn it back on and do a graceful shutdown. So before you shut down the machine, make sure that all the critical processes are gracefully shut down or stopped. All the activities are stopped on the machine. Then shut down the machine from inside the OS then come back to the portal and shut down the machine from the portal, and after that resize it, and then turn it back on from the portal. This is the process that you need to follow.
If the VM is still running in the Azure, will it be Microsoft costing for that also?
Absolutely. When the VM is running in Azure, Microsoft will continue to charge you for it. So whatever is the per month cost of the VM, you will keep on paying that cost on pro rata basis when the VM is running. But when the VM is stopped, from the portal, so example, this VM is running, let's say Azure Monitor LAW, this VM is running. I can select this VM and stop this VM. When I stop this VM, the resources that is allocated to this VM, which is CPU and RAM, will be deallocated, will return back to the hardware. And then those resources will be allocated to other customers. So when you are not using any resources, Azure will not charge you. So whenever the status of a VM shows as stop deallocated, you are absolutely not getting charged for the VM. You are not getting charged for the CPU and memory, but there will still be a charge on account of storage, because VM is also using a disk C drive, which is containing the operating system. So you will be charged for storage. You will also be charged for any public IP if the VM has. But that charge is negligible as compared to the charges of the VM. Make sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So you can see the other VM, I've just stopped it. So that's how we provision a VM. Now, as I said, you will need to provision more VMs. So at least let's provision one more VM. You should at least have 4 VMs and provision the VMs with lowest SQ available. I would say provision the VMs with 1 CPU core, so that the overall charges that you will incur from those VMs will be least. Because we are not doing anything inside the VM. We hardly need to connect to our VMs. We are not deploying applications. We are just using those VMs as log sources for Sentinel. So that is why we need VMs. So I'll select my resource group once again. I'll select my machine name, which is Win2K22. So I'm provisioning 22 server operating system here. No infrastructure redundancy under available. Security type should be standard. Size should be 2022. So this is where we have 2022. And when you select the size, you will notice that the security type changes to trusted once again. So bring it back to standard. Then select the size, which is 1 CPU core, 3.5 GB RAM. Type the username and password. And the same operation, I'm saying after username and password, go to disk blade and only select standard SSD here. That's all you need to do here. On the networking tab, select your network and select the subnet. That's it. Check the box that says delete public IP and NIC when the VM is deleted. And then no changes on the management, monitoring, advanced. Select the same tags, owner, yourself, purpose, and review plus create. I'm creating this VM now. Now, while it says deployment in progress in Azure, you should not switch to any other screen because it may interrupt the process. Your resource deployment may fail. So the right approach is to duplicate the tab and then on the other tab, you can do your activity. So I'll permission VM. Yep.
In that licensing tab, should we check that box? Would you like to create an existing Windows Server license?
No, don't check this box because we don't have a license. See,
Okay.
nothing is trust-based in Microsoft. If you don't have a license, don't say that you have it. The benefit that you will get is the cost of the VM will be reduced by 10-15% of its monthly cost. But what if Microsoft comes to know tomorrow that you don't have license and you chose that you have license? So then you are breaching the trust. And if that happens, Microsoft may suspend your account or may penalize you for it. So don't check the box that you have license.
Okay.
All right. So I have 3 Windows VM, 2019, 2012, and this Azure Monitor LAW is 2016 because this is what I did create yesterday. I'll create one more Linux VM. Okay, so I'll create Linux VM also. Let's say Ubuntu I'll create. Now, guys, I'm not a Linux person, so I have very limited knowledge on Linux platform. I'm say the good to know knowledge I have, which is what I need to at least deliver my training, but I'm not an expert with Linux. My expertise is on Windows operating system. So I'll select Ubuntu and I'll type Ubuntu VM. I cannot use underscore in the VM name, but I can use hyphen. So I'll select no infrastructure redundancy required, and I'll use the same version that it is showing me. Ubuntu has two versions, 22.04 and 20.04. So I'll use the previous one, 20.04, not the latest. Latest may have certain issues. Every time you choose the image, the security type changes because Microsoft wants you to use this virtual machine, which is an expensive affair. I will use standard once again. That's it. The size should remain 1 CPU core. Now for Linux virtual machines, when you provision, you have SSH option and password option. I'll select the password option, username and password option for Linux also. Instead of SSH, I'll select the password. So I've selected the password. Rest of the information will remain the same. Since it is Linux, it will automatically choose the inbound port as 22. On the disk, I will select standard SSD. On the networking tab, I'll select my network and my subnet. I'll check the box. Management monitoring advanced will remain as it is. I'll select my tabs and review plus create. So this VM is also getting created. All right, the machine is getting deployed. So with this machine in place, I would have 4 virtual machines, 3 Windows and 1 Linux.
So, Raghuveer, so if we want to change the disk, how we can change?
What disk you want to change? You want to say,
So, yeah, previously I have selected premium SSD
mm,
storage type. So
okay,
I want to change it to standard.
okay. So for that, you will need to navigate to the VM. Now, while you are making any changes to the disk, VM should be stopped. It is the same concept. What if you are copying some data on the disk and all of a sudden you change its, SKU, which will move that disk from one hardware to another. See, premium is on a different hardware, standard is on a different hardware. You're changing it from premium to standard and vice versa. The machine must be in stock state. So let's say I want to change for this VM, Azure Monitor LAW. It is in stock state. I'll click on this VM and under settings, there's an option that says disk. I'll click on the disk. Here it will show me the disk of the VM. Right now the VM has one OS disk and no data disk. It is empty. So there is only one disk on the VM. So you will need to select that disk. So you basically navigate to the disk, and in the disk you have an option that says size plus performance. You will need to click on size plus performance here, and here you see an option that says storage type. Select the storage type. Right now it is standard. You can move to premium or you can change it to standard SDD, whatever you want to change it. Select that type, new type, and hit save. And this will save it. So that's how we change it. Give me a moment. All right, so this is how we basically change the storage type and size of the disk. You can also change the size of the disk. By default, an OS disk in Azure is of 127 GB. You can always increase the size of a disk, but you cannot decrease it. So if it is 127, if I want to make it 126, I'll get an error. It says the reducing disk size is not supported in Azure to prevent data loss. So I can always make it 128, but not 26. I cannot reduce the size. I can always increase it. So remember this limitation, and it is not with Azure, it is with all the clouds. Cloud service providers do not allow for reducing the size of the storage. You can always extend it. And you can also change the storage type from premium to standard and standard to premium from this window. So I will not save it, but once you're done with your choice, just save it and it will change and then turn your virtual machine back on. So this is the process. Make sense?
Yes, yes, Raghuveer understood. Also, if you go back, there will be another option, right? Create an attached disk.
Yep. I'm saying
So
if you want to see when you provision a virtual machine, it only gets provisioned with one disk, which is OS disk. But if you need more disk or volume on the VM, see in Azure terminology we call it disk. Inside the OS we'll call it volume. So if you need more disk attached to the VM so that you can create volumes inside the OS and you can keep application data or any other data, because you should not keep anything on the OS disk. Because when the VM is corrupted, the data on the OS disk will not be available. So you should always keep data on a separate disk, separate drive. So you can create and attach a new disk or attach existing disk. So if you have an existing disk, you can select this option and select that disk from the drop down. So there is no existing disk available. So you can hit create and attach a new disk and you can select the disk name, whatever you want to do. Select the disk storage type, always select, the standard SSD or the standard SDD, not premium unless explicitly needed. Select the size of the disk. It starts with 4 GB, goes until 16 terabyte, 32 terabyte in some cases. Select the size. And once you are done with this, just click on save on the top. When you click on save, it will first create a disk of this size and then attach that disk to this VM. And then you will need to log into the VM, RDP or SSH into the VM, and initialize the disk from the disk management. So that disk will start to reflect inside your VM, and you can use that space for your storage purpose. This is the process that we follow. Make sense?
Yes, Raghuveer, understood.
Okay.
Could you just quickly show that again, please?
I didn't get it. Can you repeat that?
Could you just show the adding the disks again?
Yeah, disk. Okay. Yeah. So I was showing that how do we attach a new disk to a VM or attach an existing disk to a VM. So we navigate to the VM. Under settings, there is an option that says disk. Click on this option. And here you see the current storage of the VM. So on the VM, there is an OS disk right now. You can see here, this is the OS disk. It is of 127 GB. And it does not have any additional disk. So if you want to attach more disk, then they will be known as data disk. So you
Okay,
can,
cool. Thank you.
yeah,
I just
click on
needed to see
create
what
an
option.
Yeah, this is the option, attach existing disk and create and attach a new disk. So you can exercise one of these two options.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. All right, guys. So
Like,
our virtual machines are clean.
Raghuveer, 1 second. Can we change the administration account password and username if we want to change means?
If we
Or
want to
it's
change
yeah.
the wrong statement, if we forget, if we
Yeah,
lose,
if we forget this. The password if we forget, or can we change that?
yes, we can change it from the same overview blade. Scroll it down under help. There's an option that says reset password. So you can click reset password here. Now, when you reset the password, the virtual machine should be up and running. For other operations, it has to be stopped, but for resetting the password, it has to be up and running. So for example, this 2019 virtual machine. I assume that I've just forgot the password of this virtual machine. So I'll click on reset password, and here I'll type the username and password. So I can also change the username. If I remember the username, I'll type it and type the new password. If I don't remember the username, I'll type any username here, and that will become the username, administrator username for the VM, and the new password that whatever you will put here. So yes, as an admin, you can change the username and password, but it depends who you are. I'm saying depends on your current role. For example, right now, my current role is contributor. This is my permission. I am a contributor. Contributor is somebody who has administrative access on Azure. That is why I'm able to do this activity. But if somebody who is a reader or somebody who is a network contributor tries to do the same operation, that person will not be able to do it. They will get an error that you are not authorized. So only virtual machine contributor or subscription contributor has the capability to change the admin password, admin username and password of a machine. Make sense? You just need to type
Yes. Okay.
information,
Thank you.
hit update, and this new username and password will be allocated to the virtual machine. Any other question, guys?
Yeah, hi Raghuveer. Last question. Can we able to edit that security type which we select trusted or standard, right? So
No.
can we able to edit it for the already launched VM?
No. Security type means hardware in the backend. Trusted virtual machines and confidential computing are the new capabilities that Azure has added. Standard doesn't mean that it is not secure. Standard is also secure. It is just that technology is evolving, requirements are changing. So Azure has added additional capabilities to its product portfolio. Trusted virtual machine basically means virtual machine will be configured on a separate hardware which has infrastructure encryption enabled. That's trusted virtual machine. Standard means virtual machine will be provisioned on a hardware, and as a customer, it is your responsibility to safeguard the virtual machine. So trusted virtual machines is a new offering, and it is an expensive offering. Do not use trusted unless it is explicitly needed. Make sense? And you cannot switch from trusted to standard and vice versa.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so now you can see I have a total of 5 virtual machines here. I have a 2019, 2022, an Ubuntu VM, a Linux virtual machine also, and this Azure Monitor LAW, this log analytics workspace in short. This is my 2016. Now, nobody has asked me this question. I'll ask and answer. Can we change the name of the VM? No. Can we change the name of a resource in Azure? No. Azure never allows to change the name of a resource once it is provisioned. And it is not with VM, it is with all the resources, whether it's a storage account, whether it's a network, whether it's a database, whether it's resource group, whether it's a username in Azure Active Directory. Changing the name of resources is not allowed in Azure. However, it is very much allowed in AWS and GCP. Why? Because the resources are not identified by their name, they are identified by their resource ID, which is provided by the cloud service provider. So when you provision a VM in AWS, you can keep any name, and then later on you can change the name of the VM. And it hardly makes any difference to AWS because every resource has a resource ID, resource identifier through which cloud service provider identifies that resource. So name is only internal to the customer, not to AWS. But in Azure, name is also relates to the Azure. So name cannot be changed. And why it cannot be changed? Just go to any resource and go to its property. You will see one thing which is known as ARN, Azure Resource Name. This is the resource ID. This is the unique property. I'm saying if you are facing any issue with this VM or with any resource and you submit a support request, Azure will ask you for the resource ID. Now, what information does the resource ID contain? You can see resource ID contains your subscription ID, so that Azure will know, okay, the issue is with this subscription. Inside the subscription, the resource group in which the resource is contained. So Azure will know, okay, inside the subscription, there's a resource group with the name Sentinel in which the resource is contained. And that inside that resource group, the resource is a service which is Microsoft Compute. So which means customer is talking about a virtual machine. And here's the name of the virtual machine, Azure Monitor LAW. So this entire string is the resource ID. You will always need to give resource ID to Azure when you are stuck, when you need support. That is why it is not allowed to change the name of the resource because it is integrated into the resource ID. However, in AWS, it is not the case. It is not the case with GCP and other clouds either. So remember, resource name cannot be changed. Rest of the information, majority of the properties of a resource can be changed. Make sense? Okay. So we have got these virtual machines. Why did we create these virtual machines? What was the purpose of it? We created because we wanted the logs from these virtual machines to go into Sentinel. That was the purpose of creating these virtual machines. So how do we send logs to Sentinel is something that I will discuss later. But have these virtual machines provisioned, and after they are provisioned, shut them down. Shut down the virtual machines to save the cost. So I'm now selecting all the virtual machine and hit stop. So provision the virtual machines and stop them. We'll come back to these virtual machines later. We have another service to get provisioned now. So everyone go ahead and stop the virtual machines. Virtual machines are getting built on minute basis. If you're not using them, every minute you're losing some cents or some paisa. If the virtual machine is costing you, let's say $100 a month, then it will cost you around $3 a day. Divided by 24, you will get to know the per minute cost of the virtual machine, even though it is in cents, but it will be significant when you don't shut it down. So if you're not using it, shut it down. That way you will save the cost of compute. It will still charge you for storage. It will still charge you for public IP or any other service configured on the machine, but those charges are negligible. Those charges are very low. The main charge is the compute charge. So I've stopped all the virtual machines. Now Azure is not charging me anymore for these virtual machines. So that is about the virtual machines. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes.
Okay. Now, next we need to provision a couple of storage accounts. So we are done. We have provisioned users. We have provisioned virtual machines. We have provisioned network. Now we need to provision storage. We're trying to build the core services in our subscription so that we will have enough food for Sentinel to work with. Next, let's provision storage accounts. So in the search, you need to type storage. It will show you the options. Storage accounts is what you need to select. So select storage account. You will see the storage account blade. If there are storage accounts, you will see it. Otherwise, you don't see anything. So you will need to hit create. And guys, all of these services, in the prerequisites URL, prerequisites link, I shared the URL for all of these services the last week on Thursday and Friday. So even if you don't have good understanding of these services, it is recommended. I recommend you to go ahead and read about these services because I don't want to get into the detail of it as we will digress from the core objective. So we are just configuring these services because we need them for Sentinel, but we are not going into the depth of these services. However, if you have any specific question, the way others were asking that how do we do this, how do we do that on a service, I will be more than happy to answer. So that I can do, but I will myself not go into the detail of any service because our objective is something different. Okay, let's move on. So how do we create a storage account? So again, you have a couple of tabs and you will need to fill information on all the tabs. So my first tab is basics, which is common to all the services. I will select my resource group, which is already there. Then I will select the name of the storage account. Now, name of the storage account must be in lowercase. It must be unique across Azure, and it should be between 3 to 23 characters, 3 to 24 characters. So I'll put the name of the storage account, which is testing SA 7788. When the name is available, you will not get an error. But if the name is not available, you will get an error. For example, if I type sample assay, you can see it says the storage account name sample assay is already taken. So you cannot use this name. So it is a good habit of adding some numerals to see if that name is available. So this one is available, I'll take it. Region is East US. Why are we deploying everything in East US? Because East US is the largest data center of Microsoft and enough capacity is available. If we select any other region, we might be limited by the capacity. Azure will not prioritize a sponsorship pass or trial customer over a paid customer. So if there are limited capacity available, Azure will not allow you to choose that region or provision resources in that region. So to be on safer side, we always choose East US. And in fact, Azure suggests free trial and sponsorship, users to use East US as their primary region for the purpose of, learning Azure or doing whatever they wish to, by virtue of that free trial or sponsorship pass. So we're choosing East US, performance standard. Now, this is where the cost is. Always choose the performance as standard because if you choose premium, the cost will be 10 times of what performance is. So always choose standard. And in the redundancy, you will need to choose LRS, which is locally redundant storage. LRS basically means that Azure will provision 3 copies of your data and keep those 3 copies in the same data center where the storage account is getting provisioned. So you will have redundancy of data. If your primary copy is lost, corrupted, then you will still have a backup in the form of additional copies that will be used to grant you access to the data. So that's what LRS is. It is the lowest cost-effective option in Azure. So we'll select performance as standard, redundancy as LRS. Then we'll click on next. Now this is where no changes on the advanced screen. No changes you need to do here. Next is networking, no changes. Data protection, uncheck these boxes. Uncheck the 3 boxes that says enable soft delete. What does this means basically? It basically means that you are creating the storage account and then you will upload some data, store some data in the storage account. What if you accidentally delete the data? Microsoft will store that data for 7 days. It is like recycle bin. You delete something from your laptop, it goes into recycle bin. It stays there for 30 days, and after 30 days, it is permanently deleted. So Microsoft will store that data for 7 days, and after 7 days, it will permanently delete it. But since this is my lab environment, I don't want Microsoft to store that data for 7 days also. The day I delete my storage account, everything should get deleted permanently that day only, that moment only. So that's the reason I'm unchecking these boxes. So we are not checking anything on the data protection tab. On the next encryption tab, let's go with the default. On the tags, yes, you will need to use the tags. So I'll use the tag. And then I will hit review plus create. Okay. So the validation passed. I see the create button highlighted, which means I can create the storage account. So I've created the storage account. It is getting created. Now, similar to this, I will need to create at least 4 or 5 storage accounts so that we have enough resources in our lab. And you will need to upload some data also. Do not upload the same data in the storage account. Upload separate files in the storage account. I'm not asking you to upload MBs of data, hundreds of files. Upload at least 1 or 2 files of different type in each storage account. So my storage account is created. It says deployment is complete. Go to resource. And this is where my storage account is. Sample SAS 7788. You can see the tags here, my name and the purpose. So if somebody logs into this Azure subscription and see this storage account and not sure what this storage account is, who does it belong to, what was the purpose of building it, at least that person will look at the tag and will get some basic information. At least the person will know who to connect with to get more detailed information about this resource. So that's the beauty of tags. So similarly, I will need to create more storage accounts. I'll create some additional storage accounts. So I'll provision the storage account. And I'll choose the same configuration. No changes on advanced networking. On data protection, I'll uncheck all the 3 boxes. Encryption, same, review, and hit create. So my storage account is getting created. All right, this one is also created. So now I have a couple of storage accounts in my subscription also. So I've got virtual machines, virtual networks, storage accounts, a couple of users in group. So I've got enough resources in my subscription. Guys, let's complete this activity. I'll give you 10 minutes. Those who are done can take a break. Those who are not can continue to provision this. And this is what we wanted to build at a bare minimum in our account. However, this is your account. You are the admin of the account. You have the privileges. If you wish to build any other service that you would like to assess using Sentinel, go ahead and build that service. If you have expertise in any other service, let's say databases, data factory, data break, data warehouses, AI/ML, Azure functions, any serverless service like Kubernetes, containers, anything that you have expertise with in Azure and you want to have that service integrated with Sentinel and assessed by Sentinel for security misconfigurations and anomalies, go ahead and do it. You have no restrictions here, but this is the bare minimum that I want each and every participant to have in their respective Azure subscription, so that you will at least see the basic functionality of Sentinel there.
So you need 5 accounts. Is that what you're after?
Which account?
For storage accounts, do you want 5 of them?
No, I'm seeing 4 or 5, a minimum of 4 or 5 storage accounts we need.
Okay.
And all of these storage accounts, you will need to upload data also. So how do we upload data in these storage accounts? Let's click on one of these storage account. And inside the storage account, on the overview blade, there's an option that says data storage. Under data storage, you have 4 services: containers, file shares, queues, and tables. These are the storage services in Azure. Container is our object storage, wherein we can upload object data, which is Word, PowerPoint, Excel, any object data, which includes virtual machine, hard disk also. File share is similar to file shares that you have in on-premises or you have in your company, wherein you know a URL, you add that file share as a network drive on your laptop, or you open, or you do / in the file share name, and then it shows you the file share, all the folders, and you can copy data from there, you can use data from there, read data from there. So it is the same file share service that you have in Azure, but this has more capability than a traditional file share can provide. Then queues. Queue is a storage service which we primarily use in applications. So when you have microservices based applications where there are different modules and they interact with one another for the functionality of the application, we store communication in the queues. So when one module needs to talk to another module and the other module is already busy serving the previous request, the request goes into a queue and it is processed from the queue. So that's queue storage. And then table storage is your NoSQL storage, wherein you can store data in the form of tables and you can then use that data for any specific purpose. So those are the 4 type of storage services in Azure. We'll focus on containers. So we'll click on containers and we will create a container. Now you can see a container with the name logs is already created here. So whenever you create a storage account, a container with the name logs, $logs is already created. And in this container, logs of this storage account will be stored. So we will not use this container for any personal data storage. We will create a new container, which is, we'll click on plus container here and we'll create a container. So I can put a container name as similar to my storage account, sample SA7788 container. Container name should also be in lowercase. And the access level of container is private. It has to be private as per the best practice. I will only make it blob or container which is public as and when the requirements are. But default, I'll keep it private so that nobody will have access to the data stored in this container other than yourself. So I'll create the container. My container is created. I'll click on the container and here I can upload the data. So on the top, it says upload. I'll click on upload. It opens a pop-up to my right on the screen. It says browse for files. I'll browse for files, which will give me access to my local system. And from my local system, I can upload some data into this container. So let's say I want to upload some data here. So I'm uploading some data into the container. And I'll hit upload. So now the data is getting uploaded. I've actually selected by mistake a file of 60 MB. So it will take maybe a minute to get uploaded completely. So when you're uploading the data into the container, make sure that you are only selecting small file sizes like in KBs or maybe a couple of MB. Don't go beyond it. You're not going to use that data at all. We're just building the service. So it is uploading that file of 60 MB as we speak. Okay, it will get uploaded in some time. So this is how you upload the data in the container. So let's create a couple of storage accounts, create at least one container in each storage account and upload 2 or 3 files of lower size. The files could be a Word document, a PowerPoint presentation, an Excel spreadsheet. It could be a WordPad and an image in JPEG, an audio in MP3, a video in MP4, any discrete object that you would like to upload. Upload it into your storage containers. And if you notice, I am doing all of this activity, virtual machine provisioning, virtual network provisioning, storage account provisioning, all of this activity using this user, which I created this morning, Ram Kumar. And why I'm able to do that? Because this user has contributor access. So contributor is an admin who has all the privileges in an Azure subscription, except few privileges which are reserved by owner only. All right, guys, let's take 10 minutes break now. We will resume the session at sharp 11:25, 25 minutes past 11 in the morning here in India. Thank you. let's move on. So now that we have the infrastructure built and anything which is left, I would expect you to complete it by today itself. Let's just understand the monitoring and auditing part of it.
Yeah, hello Raghuveer, I have one doubt.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So all these activities we have done in our owner account. So, but we could see all these are reflecting in our user accounts as well.
Yeah, they are reflecting in user account because your users have the permissions. Your users may have reader permission, which means they can see all the services. They can view the configuration of the services. However, they cannot make changes to the services configuration. They cannot provision new services. They cannot delete the existing services if they have read-only permission. If your users are admin and having contributor access, then they can also delete a service, they can provision new service, they can change the configuration of an existing service. So depending on who that user is, what level of permissions has been granted to that user identity, the user will be able to perform a specific task. Make sense?
Oh, yeah, okay. So in the Sentinel logs will be coming from the owner account, right? So from where we have done the activity.
No. Sentinel logs has nothing to do with owner or user. Logs will come from the data sources. Virtual
Okay.
data source. Storage account is a data source. Network is a data source. So logs will come from the data sources, irrespective of who has provisioned that data source or who have access to that data source. Make sense? It has
Yes,
nothing to
Raghuveer,
do
yeah.
with owner and it has nothing to do with identities. These
Okay,
are
okay. Yeah.
these are the services. And in Sentinel language, we call them data sources because these are the log sources. Logs from these services will be sent to a workspace which will be attached to the Sentinel. So that is our next topic that we want to understand. How do we do logging and monitoring in Azure? Sentinel will come later on. Okay,
Okay, Raghuveer, understood. Thank you.
great. Let's move on. So now that we have built the environment, we have built the basic environment, which is which is sufficient for us to build the Sentinel service. But before Sentinel service, we need to understand these two topics, logging and monitoring. Because even if you build the Sentinel service on day one, you would still need data sources. You will still need logging and monitoring configured because Sentinel has high dependency on it. So what we are doing, we are going step by step. We are following linear and logical approach to build the infrastructure from scratch, to build all the configuration and configure all the services that Sentinel will need on day one. So when we reach to the Sentinel phase, we will quickly understand it. Okay. So let's understand the logging and monitoring part. First, we will understand the monitoring and then we will understand the logging part. So monitoring service in Azure. Now in Azure, the service that we use for monitoring, the name of that service is Monitor, or we also call it Azure Monitor. This is the name of the service that we use for monitoring the services and resources in Azure. So that's the name of the service, Azure Monitor. Okay, let's switch to the portal. And on the portal in the search, let's type Monitor and you will see the service Monitor. Click on it. This is your Monitor service. What you see on the screen is Monitor service. Azure has come a long way. What you see today is not what it used to be yesterday and day before, or maybe a couple of months ago, maybe a couple of years ago. But what you see today is what you need to learn, not what used to happen in the past, because that's history now. Nobody bothers about history. We only need to know history when we want to appreciate the present. So I know the history and I'm able to appreciate the present because I know what Azure has done in the last couple of years to improve or to make their monitoring services effective, which it did not in the initial run. So in the history, when you go back into the history, you will find that Azure had different services for different monitoring requirements. And that would make it complex for the customers to understand. And it was also cost consuming. It was also a costly affair. So customers would not go with native cloud native or Azure native monitoring service. They would rather continue to use the existing monitoring solution that they always had in on-premises. Even if they migrate to Azure, they would continue to use that same solution. Now that solution may not have all the capabilities to monitor all the services of Azure. It can monitor a virtual machine, but it cannot monitor a storage account because storage account is a unique service in Azure. Virtual machine is a common service. It is nothing but an operating system configured with some hardware resources. That's what virtual machine is. So any monitoring service can monitor the virtual machine. So in the past, we used to have different services for monitoring. Now, what are my monitoring use cases? I typically monitor my infrastructure. I monitor my applications. I monitor my network. And I monitor any miscellaneous service that I need to. So these are my monitoring goals, basically. So when it comes to monitoring, an organization wants to monitor the infrastructure. Infrastructure comprises of servers, desktop, laptop, devices, endpoints. That's what infrastructure is. Applications comprises of applications. It could be internal or public facing applications. And the applications could be in .NET, in Java, in C, C++, any platform that they are using. When it comes to monitoring, I want to monitor my network traffic. And I want to monitor my networking devices like switches, routers, firewall, or I would say VPN devices, firewall, etc. That's my network monitoring is. And for miscellaneous, I could have any third-party service. Any third-party service that I want to monitor. So these are my monitoring goals. These are the monitoring goals for an organization. Now, in order to achieve these goals, in order to monitor these services, they would use different set of softwares. For infrastructure monitoring, they will use a separate solution. For application monitoring, they would use a separate solution. Let's take some examples. So for application monitoring, you must have heard about these solutions: App Dynamics, Dynatrace, Datadog, New Relic, App Insights, etc. These are the solutions that are leaders when it comes to application monitoring or application performance monitoring. Similarly, for infrastructure monitoring, you have SCOM from Microsoft, Manage Engine Ops Manager from Manage Engine. You have Vistara, which is another tool for monitoring. There are a number of tools when it comes to infrastructure monitoring. Similarly, for network monitoring, we have SolarWinds, which has a great reputation in the market. SolarWinds, we have PRTG, which is another networking solution. So there are multiple networking monitoring solutions available. And similarly for miscellaneous, I'm saying, depending on what that application is, you have monitoring solutions. Now the question is, when I migrate to cloud, will I be taking this overhead with me? This burden of using these monitoring solutions in cloud? Because in cloud, I will also have infrastructure. In cloud, I will also have applications configured, hosted inside the infrastructure or hosted in PaaS and SaaS model. I will also have a network. I may not have switches and routers, but my network has the switching and routing capability. I have firewall devices, VPN devices in Azure also, and I may have third-party services also. So what should I be doing? Should I be continuing with the same process that I follow, or do I have a solution? Yes, there is a solution in the name Azure Monitor, which is a full-blown solution which has the capability to monitor the infrastructure, applications, network, and any miscellaneous service. And it did not have this capability from day one. Microsoft has enabled these capabilities in the last couple of years. And today it's a full-grown software. That's what Azure Monitor is. So let's see Azure Monitor overview. Now you can see Azure Monitor has insights. Insights means monitoring capability. It has application insights. Using this capability, I can monitor my application's availability and performance, errors, and usage. I have container insights. I can monitor my containers and Kubernetes instances. I have VM insights. I can monitor my servers, laptop, and desktop using VM insights. I have network insights. Using network insights, I can monitor my network and any networking device. So I have these all capabilities integrated into one service, which is Azure Monitor now. So what do I have as we speak? I have virtual machines, I have network, and I have storage accounts also. So what are we going to do in the next step? We are going to configure the monitoring of these services. And monitoring will generate alerts which will be streamed into Sentinel. So that's what we are going to do now. Now, before we get into the configuration of monitoring for the services that we have built, let's understand some additional aspects of Azure Monitor. And you also need to understand one service simultaneously. So Azure Monitor versus Log Analytics. These two services are mission critical to Sentinel because these are the services which feeds Sentinel, which gives food to Sentinel to process, consume, analyze, and then share the outcome. Log Analytics and Azure Monitor. These two services are very critical for Sentinel. So Azure Monitor is for the monitoring and Log Analytics is for the logging. So Azure Monitor is for monitoring. And Log Analytics is for logging. However, what Microsoft is doing in the process of streamlining and consolidating service portfolio, Microsoft is integrating the capabilities of log analytics to Azure Monitor. And slowly and gradually, Microsoft is deprecating the log analytics capabilities and adding them to Monitor. So if I am learning Sentinel today, should I be learning Sentinel the old way or the new way? Or the future way, that what will happen in future, how it will be managed in future? I would rather learn it in the present and future way, not in the past way. Because in the past, Sentinel would need this. But today, Sentinel needs this. And Sentinel will need this in future also. Because this log analytics is going to get deprecated. It is going to be deprecated. When it is going to be deprecated, I'll show you. I'm not here. Okay, over here itself. See, the moment I navigate to my log analytics workspace service, I have a log analytics workspace. On the overview tab itself, I see this. Read it. It says the log analytics agent used to collect logs from virtual machines and servers will no longer be supported from August 31st, 2024, which is 1 year from now. They will completely go out of support. Plan to migrate to Azure Monitor Agent before this date. So Microsoft is suggesting all the customers that go ahead, initiate a project, migrate everything from Log Analytics to Azure Monitor, because Log Analytics service will not be available from this date. And you just have 1 year left, which is very short time frame for any large organization to do a project like this. So when we are learning Sentinel, we will learn Sentinel the Azure Monitor ways, not the log analytics ways, because any which ways, 6 months from now, or probably they have already started doing it for the existing customer, you will not have log analytics existing. You will not have those capabilities existing. So I will teach you Sentinel, the Azure Monitor ways, so that tomorrow when you work in Sentinel domain, tomorrow when you deploy Sentinel, you will know the most recent way of deploying Sentinel, not the way that is outdated, that is no more supported. Is that understood, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that is why I'm discussing about Azure Monitor here. Otherwise, I would have directly started with log analytics. So we need to focus on Azure Monitor, and we will try to configure everything in Azure Monitor so that the deployment that we will do today will go in the long run without any configuration changes or without the need of doing any changes. Okay. So as I said, Azure Monitor is for monitoring and log analytics is for logging. But now Azure Monitor is for both logging and monitoring. It is both monitoring and logging. So we'll focus on this service. However, there's a catch here. Azure Monitor also uses log analytics in the backend. So what it basically means, first, what is log analytics? That's what you need to understand. So log analytics is a storage repository. So if you want me to define log analytics in one simple statement, I would say it is a storage repository. It is a log storage repository. That's what this service is. One single statement I can define what log analytics is. It is a log storage repository. We store logs here. We store logs here for lockdown. And then if I want to go on, then I will say that it also provides capabilities to query logs for analysis purpose. That's my next statement. And this completes log analytics. This query part, this query portion is enabled via KQL, which is Kusto query language. So it has integration with KQL, using which you can query logs and you can find the relevant information that you are looking for. You can do the analysis. That's what log analytics service is all about. Now, this capability is being integrated into Azure Monitor. Now, Azure Monitor has KQL. Azure Monitor has log storage repository. So Azure Monitor is now both monitoring and logging service. Azure Monitor used to be infrastructure monitoring service in 2019. Only infrastructure monitoring we will do using Azure Monitor. There used to be a separate service for application monitoring, and the name of that service was Application Insights. There was a separate service for network monitoring in Azure, and the name of the service was Network Watcher, Network Connection Monitor. And then Microsoft decided to integrate them all into one service, and they came up with a new name with the name of Azure Monitor. And now Microsoft is also deprecating log analytics, and it is building all the capabilities of log analytics into Azure Monitor slowly and gradually. By the end of next year, August 24th, log analytics name will disappear completely. Nobody know this name. That's what Microsoft is committed to. So we will learn Azure Monitor. So we'll learn Sentinel the Azure Monitor way, not the log analytics way. And similarly, there has been a lot of changes that Microsoft has also done in the Sentinel service in the last 1 month. We will learn what has changed and how we do in the current model, not how we used to do it a month ago. So that's what we are going to do. As I said, I will teach you something that happens in production, not something that is written in the books. Okay. So that is why we need to focus on this service. That is why we are spending time here in discussing what this service is, how does it work, and what value proposition it will bring on the table, not from Sentinel perspective, but from the service perspective, and what it has to do with the Sentinel also. Okay. So what are we going to do now? How do we work with Azure Monitor? Let's first quickly see, and that we will do tomorrow because we don't have much time left and you are also not ready with the infrastructure. But I'll quickly show how log analytics would work in the past or how log analytics works today. So if I go to log analytics workspace, so I'll navigate to log analytics here. And I see this log analytics. You will see most of the options in log analytics are deprecated now. Over here on the overview blade, you will see it says legacy. It has started using word legacy here. Earlier, it used to be agent management, activity log, storage account. Now it says legacy, legacy, legacy. Why? Because it wants to give you the message that these are old ways now. Then for some of the capabilities, it says deprecated, 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 which means these capabilities are no more available. And very soon, the one that says legacy, legacy, legacy will also say deprecated, deprecated, deprecated. And by the mid of next year, June, July, this entire overview blade will disappear. You will hardly have any options here. And in August, this service will disappear. When you will type log analytics, nothing would appear, as if this service never existed. So this is how it looks like, that most of the things are getting deprecated. Now in log analytics, you have the option of logs. This is where you can query the logs, but the same capability are now available in Monitor. So I'll open Monitor service simultaneously. So this is Monitor service. You can see Monitor service has log option available now. Log analytics, in log analytics, we basically onboard virtual machines so that we can configure those virtual machines to send logs to log analytics service. And that's where the capability is that says virtual machines, but now it's deprecated. And that capability is now available in Monitor. Under Monitor, in the insights, you will see an option that says virtual machine. So that capability is available here now. Similarly, in log analytics, you will see options like agent management. Now this agent management, when you click on agent management, you will not find anything here. Now this capability, agent management capability, is now moved here under virtual machines. This is where it has moved now. This place, it has moved here. Okay. Similarly, and agent management, we basically see over here, it is also giving you the warning. it will give you warning everywhere because Microsoft doesn't want a customer to use the service anymore. So it says the log analytics agent won't be supported on this date. Plan to migrate to Azure Monitor Agent prior to this date. If you have already installed Azure Monitor Agent, make sure to create and associate data collection rules to the agent. So what it says that use data collection rule instead of using this agent management portion. But what exactly do we do here? In this portion, we basically collect logs. So we collect event logs from the machines, and these are the event logs, error warning information. Inside the machine, when you go to event viewer, you see logs. So if on this laptop, if I type event viewer, I will see all the operating system logs here in the event viewer. This is event viewer. This is event viewer service. Now the logs from machines are basically sent from here. So if you have any solution, be it Alert Logic, Securonics from Dell, Splunk, FireEye, any SIEM solution, if it has integration with servers, virtual machines, laptop, desktop, and if those servers are sending logs to the SIEM solution, those logs are basically being sent from here. This is where the logs are collated, and from here the logs are streamed into the solution. So here you will see Windows logs, application logs, security logs, system logs. These are critical logs for me. Security logs, system logs are very critical for me. I may not need application logs, but security and system logs are critical for me. So I basically what I do in the workspace here, I will select system logs, which is this system logs, and I will select error warning and information. So I need system logs. So I will configure logs like this, and then application logs, let's say I've selected application, add, then security. So I select security logs, which is Windows client SMB security like this. This is how I would configure the Sentinel in the past, that I would create a log analytics workspace. In that workspace, I will add all my servers, and then I will give instructions to the workspace that what kind of logs you need to collect from the servers. You don't want to collect all the logs. If you do that, you will have I'm saying thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of billions of logs coming from the server every day. You don't want to collect the unnecessary logs. You only want to collect the logs that your security monitoring solution needs. So you don't want to collect performance log. You want to collect event logs. And that is what you want to collect: security logs, application logs, system logs, and any additional logs that you want to collect. You will select it from here. Similarly, if you want to collect Linux performance log, you will add filter here and you will collect the performance logs from here. You want to collect sys logs, you will collect it from here. And then you have a separate IIS logs. If you're using IIS on servers to host your websites, it will also collect IIS logs. So this is how we would collect the logs. We would configure the log collection. This is the engineering side of Sentinel, that you are trying to build Sentinel. You are trying to design the Sentinel. You are configuring your log sources that Sentinel will receive and process. Now, this is something which we don't do here. We will do it. It says data collection rules. So we will now configure data collection rules instead of this. So if we go back to monitor, under settings, you will see an option that says data collection rules. So instead of configuring it there, now we will configure it here in data collection rules. How do we create it? How do we configure it? We'll hit create. We'll select the resource group. And then here we will select the platform. Do I have Windows? Do I have Linux, or all? I'll select all. And then I'll go to next resource, wherein I will need my servers. that I need to collect the logs from. So in add resources, I will select my servers, virtual machines, and all that. So you can see I've got a couple of resource groups. I will expand them and it will underneath show me the servers, all of these servers. So I will need to select these virtual machines here like this. So I select virtual machines, hit apply. All of them will appear here. Then I'll go to the next step, which is now I want to collect logs. What type of logs? I will add data source. And here I will select what type of logs I want to collect from these servers. So I'll select a data source. Let's say performance counter is something that I'm not interested in. Because I'm configuring it for my security solution. But monitor is also a monitoring service. So if you are only using the monitor availability and performance monitoring capability, then you will configure performance counters. Now, these are my performance counters that for my server, I want to capture CPU, memory, disk, and network utilization, and basis on which I want to create alerts and events. And the sample will be taken every 60 seconds. This is basic. If I want to add more, I can hit custom, and these are the options that I can select. And there are multiple counters. You can see there are multiple pages here. So you have everything that you want to collect, but we always go with this main. These are the main resources that we would like to monitor. So we'll select this. So I'll go back to data sources, but I'm not interested in this. I'm interested in event logs because that's what my Sentinel service needs. So I would rather select these event logs. And what I want to select from application, I want to select critical, error, and warning. I will not select information and verbose. Otherwise, I will have unnecessarily log volume coming into Sentinel, which will unnecessarily increase the cost of the solution. So critical and error are most important. I'm selecting warning also. In security, I want to select both. I want to select failure, not the success. What will I do with success logs? So I am more interested into failure logs. And in this system, I'm interested into critical error and warning once again. So these are the logs that I want to get into Sentinel so that Sentinel will analyze them and tell you whether there is a probable security incident or a misconfiguration waiting for a security incident to happen. So that's how I select the logs. Then comes the destination. Now, where exactly you want to send these logs? That's the question. So now if you see here, in the destination type, you will select Azure Monitor Logs, but in the account or namespace type, you will select your workspace. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that though workspace service is getting deprecated, but in the backend, it will continue to exist, and Azure Monitor will still send logs to workspace service. Or probably Microsoft will change this name to Azure Monitor Workspace instead of saying Log Analytics Workspace. That I don't know if that ever happens. But right now, the name will continue to remain Log Analytics Workspace. And instead of configuring everything here in the agent management, you will configure it under Azure Monitor in the form of data collection rule. And then you will select the destination as the workspace. And once you select the destination, click on add data source. So you've added the Windows event logs. Similarly, you will add the next, which is Linux logs. These are all the Linux logs. As I said, I'm not that proficient with Linux. So I will leave it to you guys. If you have good proficiency with Linux, you can pick and choose what level of logs you need. For me, all are important. By default, all are selected. And I will just select the workspace where I want these logs to get ingested into. And then I'll add the data source. So this is how I will configure monitoring or logging of my servers in Azure Monitor so that they will start to send logs to Sentinel service. Something that I will do tomorrow, not today. I was just showing you the difference between monitor and log analytics service and the changes that are happening as we speak, and what these changes mean to you as a practitioner, as a Sentinel engineering team, or as a Sentinel operations team, that what you need to do, what you will do with the existing infrastructure of Sentinel that you manage. When are you going to plan the migration from log analytics agent to Azure monitor agent? When are you going to plan the migration from log analytics agent management, which will not be existing in next couple of months, to data collection rule, so that Sentinel continues to receive feed? This is all you need to do. Now, this is something that is the responsibility of engineering team, because they are responsible for making sure that the system or the solution remains up to date all the time. It has all the relevant updates. So probably you guys will be involved very soon with your existing customers to migrate the old log analytics configuration to the new Azure monitor logs, if you have not already started doing it. So start doing it as possible, because there is a high probability that if you wait till the end, till August or July next year, you will not have sufficient time to do it. And this would also require a downtime on the solution. So you need to plan it carefully with minimal or no impact on the production environment. Yep. All right. I'll take a pause here and I'm open to questions if you have any.
Yeah, just one question. So this is regarding the integration of Windows and Linux servers which are there in Azure environment, right? What about if we want to use Sentinel as a separate SIM to integrate some other environment like AWS or some other cloud, like you said, like it can be used for that as well. So in that case, how we can do the integrations?
Same concept. And say Sentinel doesn't know where that data source is hosted. For Sentinel, it is just a data source. Sentinel needs logs. Logs will only come from Azure Monitor. So all other data sources like your on-premises physical server, your VMware virtual machines, your Hyper-V virtual machines, your AWS and GCP virtual machines, all those data sources will need Azure Monitor log agent to be installed on them. So you will need to install Azure Monitor logs on those servers. And once you install the Azure Monitor log agent on the servers, then the agent will communicate with Azure Monitor service over 443 internet and send all the logs to Azure Monitor log analytics workspace. And from there, Sentinel will pick it up. So architecture wise, there is no change. You just need to migrate the log analytics agent to Azure Monitor log agent. That's what is required. Make sense?
Yeah. So that agent is like for other SIMs, like there are different kind of agent for different operating system and applications, right? So here it will be only one agent for all the data sources we need to integrate.
Absolutely.
Or
Not all the
okay.
data sources. I'm talking about compute data sources only. I mean, say for routers and switches, they don't use agents. They use CEF format, Common Event Framework format, and you use
Yeah.
syslogs. So I'm only talking about compute services, virtual machines, physical servers, laptop, desktop. That's what I'm talking about, because that is what comprises the 80% of the infrastructure of data sources for any security monitoring solution. You will have limited numbers of routers and firewall and switches that you are monitoring using any SIEM solution. The majority of the infrastructure comprises of compute service, and the change is coming at the compute service, which basically means that you will end up creating a project when you want to migrate this to the entire enterprise. You cannot do it overnight. You cannot just tell the customer that we just need 5 hours of downtime and we will migrate everything. No, you will need to plan it. You will need to open a project. You will need to identify milestones, stages, involve the team members, take the downtime and then do this activity. It's a security monitoring solution. So it does not have any impact on the production. Your production will continue to run and you can continue to do this in the backend. But even though when security monitoring solution is not available, and what if there is a security incident in the production? So it has no direct impact on the production because you're not touching the application. But when you are installing the agent, when you are uninstalling the old agent and installing the new agent, it would require a reboot on the system for this new agent to work properly. And that reboot will require a downtime on the application, which is hosted on the server. So you need to take downtime from the customer on all the servers where you need to replace the agent. So that is where it needs to be carefully.
Yeah. And for the network devices, like you said, routers, switches, all we have to do is to point their logs into Azure direction or what, or some collector or some collection will be there happening on the Azure side.
A lot will change. That's what you will learn in the next 2 days. A lot has changed in Sentinel.
Okay.
In fact, they changed something yesterday also. Yesterday, I was just building Sentinel deployment in this subscription just to see what has changed, because Azure is very dynamic. It changes a lot. Every day there is a change. Every week there is a change. And if you don't do it, if you don't do it yourself, you will become obsolete. I'm saying you will find it strange to manage. So this is what I do. This is what keeps me up to date all the time, because I do all of this from by myself in the training session. So when I was deploying Sentinel yesterday, I could I actually noticed a couple of changes and I was surprised. Wow. And then I looked into Microsoft documentation and found that those changes happened within this month only. And one of the change only happened yesterday, and that change was reflecting in the subscription. So it will not reflect in any old subscription, probably for next couple of days. However, in the new subscription that you are using today, that you have only created a day or 2 days before, you will see the new changes only. You will see the new UI only. Old UI will not be visible in the new subscription. That's how Microsoft enforces change. The new customer will always do the new configuration. Old customers will be informed in advance about the changes which are coming. They will be sent regular communication, and when the time comes, they will start getting calls from Microsoft. They will start getting pushback from Microsoft to do that change before it is too late. That's how Microsoft enforces transition. So since we are a new customer, we will configure everything in the new manner, because we may not have the old option available to us anymore. However, the same option will be available when you log into an existing customer portal, customer Azure cloud portal, which is configured for a long time. So that's what you need to understand.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, guys. So we